Now that you're finally back, hope you know you're easily replaceable. Kenneth Hoffman said it with that smirk he saved for moments when he thought he had the upper hand. I'd just walked into North Peak Engineering's main office after a week's vacation in Colorado Springs, and those were the first words out of his mouth. Not welcome back, or how was your trip? Just that. My name's Adam. I'm 49, and I'd been working government contracts for North Peak for 12 years. 12 years of clearances, relationships, and deals that kept the lights on. But Kenneth saw me as just another engineer in a cheap suit. Thanks for letting me know, I said, setting my briefcase down by my desk. He laughed like he'd made some brilliant joke and walked back to his corner office. I watched him through the glass partition, adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in his computer screen. Kenneth had been my boss for 3 years, ever since the company restructured. Before that, I'd reported directly to the CEO, Jonathan Rivers. Things were different then. I sat down and pulled up my emails. 47 messages about the Henderson defense contract, the one Kenneth had been bragging about for months, telling everyone how he'd landed the big fish. The $25 million fish that I'd spent 6 months nurturing through procurement channels he didn't even know existed. The phone rang. Colonel Patricia Barnes from the Department of Defense. Adam, good to have you back. We need to discuss the timeline adjustments for Phase 2. Of course, Colonel. Let me pull up the specifications. Kenneth's voice carried from his office. He was on another call, probably with Jonathan, taking credit for preliminary approvals that had come through while I was gone. I'd heard variations of this conversation before. The team really stepped up, he'd say. Good leadership makes all the difference. I finished the call with Colonel Barnes and stared at my computer screen. The cursor blinked in the search field of a job site I'd bookmarked months ago, but never used. My finger hovered over the mouse. 12 years. I'd built every government relationship this company had. I knew which procurement officers preferred technical specifications delivered in person, which ones needed 3 weeks minimum for review cycles, and which defense contractors were fighting for the same contracts we were. Kenneth knew none of this. He emerged from his office, straightening his jacket. Don't forget the quarterly report is due Friday, he said without looking at me. And Adam, next time you take vacation during a critical contract phase, maybe give the team a heads up. I nodded and watched him walk toward the elevator. The team, as if there was anyone else in this building who could navigate the labyrinth of federal procurement requirements that kept North Peak profitable. Something settled in my chest. Not anger, just clarity. I started at North Peak right out of the Navy. 27 years old, fresh from a deployment where I'd worked procurement logistics in some places the Pentagon preferred not to name publicly. Jonathan Rivers hired me himself back then, said he needed someone who understood how government contracts really worked, not just how they looked on paper. Those early years, I was everywhere. Trade shows in Washington, meetings in secure facilities outside Atlanta, conference calls that started at 5 a.m. because someone in Aberdeen Proving Ground needed clarification on technical specifications. I learned which officials had been there for decades and which ones were rotating through on 18-month assignments. I learned who made the real decisions and who just signed the paperwork. My security clearance was higher than anyone else's at North Peak, secret level, with compartmentalized access that took 3 years of background checks to obtain. The kind of clearance that couldn't be transferred or rushed, no matter how much money someone threw at the process. Kenneth didn't have any clearance at all. For 9 years, I worked directly with Jonathan. We'd sit in his office every Monday morning, going over pipeline opportunities, contract renewals, and relationship maintenance. He understood what it took to keep government clients happy. It's not about the lowest bid, he'd tell me. It's about trust and expertise they can't get anywhere else. Then came the restructuring. Jonathan said the company was growing, needed more layers of management. Kenneth came from a commercial construction background, had an MBA from somewhere in Atlanta. Fresh perspective, Jonathan called it. Someone who can bring business discipline to government contracts. Kenneth's first week, he asked me for a simple breakdown of our government business. I spent 3 days preparing a presentation that covered 12 active contracts, 18 potential opportunities, and the relationship map I'd built over nearly a decade. He listened for 20 minutes, then asked, "Can't we just bid lower and win more?" That should have been my warning. Over the next 3 years, I watched Kenneth take credit for every successful proposal while distancing himself from the complicated relationship work that made those successes possible. When Colonel Barnes called with questions, she asked for me specifically. When the folks at Huntsville wanted to discuss technical requirements, they scheduled calls around my availability, not Kenneth's. But in management meetings, Kenneth presented everything as his strategic vision. The worst part wasn't the credit stealing. It was watching him slowly convince himself that government contracts were just like any other business deal. He'd interrupt my calls with procurement officers to suggest efficiency improvements. He'd schedule meetings during times I'd specifically told him I was managing critical proposal deadlines. Last month, I'd overheard him telling Jonathan that the government division was finally running like a real business unit. As if the previous 11 years of steady growth and relationship building had been some kind of amateur operation. The tipping point came 3 days after Kenneth's easily replaceable comment. I was sitting in my truck outside the office, engine running, when my phone buzzed with a text from Sterling Solutions. "Adam, still interested in that senior partner position we discussed? Call me. Vincent Shaw." Vincent was the CEO of Sterling Solutions, North Peak's biggest competitor in the government space. We'd talked informally at a defense industry conference 6 months ago. He'd mentioned they were looking for someone with my background, but I'd brushed it off. Loyalty, I'd told myself. 12 years with one company meant something, but Kenneth's words kept echoing. Easily replaceable. I thought about Colonel Barnes, who'd specifically requested me for the Henderson contract, about the procurement officer at Wright-Patterson, who wouldn't return Kenneth's calls but always picked up when I called, about the 3 other major contracts currently in negotiation that existed solely because of relationships I'd spent years building. Easily replaceable. I called Vincent. "Adam, good to hear from you. Look, I'll cut to the chase. We just lost a senior partner to retirement, and we need someone who can step in immediately. Full partnership track, equity stake, and every government relationship you bring with you stays yours to manage. No micromanagement, no credit sharing." "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" 2 weeks to start, 1 week if you can swing it." I sat there for a long moment watching Kenneth through the office windows. He was gesturing animatedly in what looked like another phone call with Jonathan, probably explaining how well the government division was performing under his leadership. "Send me the paperwork," I said. The next morning I typed up my resignation letter. 2 sentences. Effective immediately. I'm resigning from my position at North Peak Engineering. Thank you for the opportunity. I printed it, signed it, and walked it directly to Jonathan's office. He looked up from his computer, surprised. "Adam, what's this about?" "Kenneth's right," I said, placing the letter on his desk. "I am easily replaceable, so you won't have any trouble finding someone else to manage the Henderson contract, or the Wright-Patterson renewal, or the Aberdeen proposal that's due next month." Jonathan's face went pale as he read the letter. "Adam, wait. Let's talk about this." But I was already walking toward the door. "I've taken a position with Sterling Solutions. They seem to think my experience has value." I cleaned out my desk while Kenneth was at lunch. 12 years of files, contact lists, and relationship notes went into 3 boxes. The government contract database stayed on the company server, but the real relationships, the ones built on trust and years of reliable service, those walked out with me. Kenneth returned from lunch as I was loading the last box into my truck. He watched from the parking lot but didn't say anything. My phone buzzed as I drove away. A text to Kenneth's number, copied to Jonathan's. Henderson defense contract canceled. Effective immediately. Colonel Barnes. Jonathan called me at 6 p.m. that same day. I was at Sterling Solutions, signing paperwork in Vincent's office. "Adam, we need to talk. This is bigger than whatever happened between you and Kenneth." "Is it?" I kept my voice level. Vincent raised an eyebrow but continued reviewing contract details. "The Henderson contract is worth $25 million over 3 years. Colonel Barnes won't take Kenneth's calls. She's saying the deal is off unless you're managing it personally." I looked out the window of Sterling's 20th floor conference room. Downtown Memphis stretched out below us, the Mississippi River catching the last light of the day. That's unfortunate. Don't play games with me, Adam. 12 years should count for something. You're right. 12 years should count for something. But your restructuring put Kenneth in charge of decisions he doesn't understand, with relationships he didn't build, in a business he's never worked. Jonathan's voice sharpened. Kenneth's got an MBA from Emory. He knows business. Government contracts aren't business, Jonathan. They're relationships, trust, security clearances that take years to get and can't be transferred. Kenneth doesn't have clearance to access half the files necessary to manage the Henderson contract, let alone the technical expertise to answer Colonel Barnes's questions. We'll get him cleared. We'll bring in consultants. Secret clearance takes 18 months minimum with no guarantees. And Colonel Barnes has worked with me for 8 years. She trusts my judgment on technical specifications and timeline management. She's not going to start over with someone new because Kenneth has an MBA. There was a long pause. Vincent finished reading and slid the partnership agreement across the table. I signed it while Jonathan searched for words. What do you want? Jonathan finally asked. I want Kenneth to understand that some people aren't easily replaceable. This is about ego? This is about competence. Kenneth spent 3 years taking credit for work he didn't do, relationships he didn't build, and expertise he doesn't have. Now he gets to find out what North Peak's government division looks like without the person who actually runs it. I hung up and handed the signed contract back to Vincent. Rough conversation? He asked. Necessary one. My phone started buzzing with texts. Kenneth, finally understanding that the Henderson contract wasn't just paperwork, but a relationship with specific people who'd worked with me for years. Then Jonathan again, then someone from North Peak's legal department. I turned the phone off. The next morning brought 3 more canceled contracts. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base pulled out of a $15 million radar upgrade project. Aberdeen Proving Ground suspended negotiations on a testing facility contract worth $8 million annually. Each cancellation came with the same message: primary contractor relationship terminated. Vincent called me into his office at 10 a.m. Adam, I've got to ask, did you know this would happen? I knew that Kenneth had convinced himself that government contracts were just about having the right paperwork and submitting the lowest bid. I knew that he didn't understand the relationship component, or the security clearance requirements, or the technical expertise expectations. What I didn't know was how quickly the clients would make their preferences clear. And now? Now Kenneth gets to learn that easily replaceable is a theory that doesn't survive contact with reality. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Your old company just lost $48 million in active contracts because one manager told one employee he was easily replaceable. That's one way to look at it. What's the other way? Kenneth spent 3 years systematically undervaluing the person who built every government relationship North Peak had. He convinced himself that management credentials were more important than technical expertise and client trust. Now he's finding out what those relationships were actually worth. By noon, my phone had 17 missed calls from North Peak numbers. Vincent and I were reviewing Sterling's current government contract portfolio when my personal phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Memphis. This is Adam. Adam, this is Patricia Barnes. I wanted to call you directly. Colonel Barnes. I stepped out of Vincent's office and walked to the conference room. Colonel, good to hear from you. I'm calling because Jonathan Rivers has been trying to reach me for 2 days, and I think there's some confusion about the Henderson contract situation. I sat down and looked out at the Memphis skyline. What kind of confusion? Mr. Rivers seems to think this is a negotiation, that North Peak can somehow maintain the contract with different personnel. I wanted to make it clear that's not the case. I see. Adam, I've been working defense procurement for 15 years. I've seen contractors come and go, and I've learned that relationships matter more than company names. The Henderson project involves classified technology integration with timeline requirements that can't accommodate learning curves or personnel transitions. She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. The technical specifications require someone with your specific background and clearance level. The timeline doesn't allow for training a replacement, And frankly, after 8 years of working together, I'm not interested in starting over with someone who doesn't understand how these projects actually work. I understand, Colonel. Do you? Because I've also had calls from Wright Patterson and Aberdeen. The consensus is clear. We work with you or we work with other contractors. North Peak without Adam isn't North Peak as far as the Department of Defense is concerned. After the call ended, I sat in the conference room for 10 minutes processing what I'd just heard. It wasn't just about the Henderson contract. It was about the entire foundation of North Peak's government business. Vincent knocked on the door. Everything all right? Colonel Barnes just explained something to me that I'd never fully understood. Which is, for 8 years, I thought I was working for North Peak, building relationships that benefited the company. But from the client perspective, the relationship was always with me personally. The company was just the administrative framework. Vincent sat down across from me. That's not uncommon in government contracting. Technical expertise and security clearances are personal assets. They don't transfer with company letterhead. Kenneth never understood that. He saw government contracts as company assets that could be managed by anyone with the right business training. And now he's discovering that $48 million in annual contract revenue was never really North Peak's to begin with. It was mine, and I was sharing it with them. My phone buzzed with another call from Jonathan. I declined it. Vincent, I need to ask you something. How many of Sterling's government relationships are dependent on specific individuals? About 60%, maybe more. Government clients don't care about corporate structure or management philosophy. They care about competence, reliability, and trust, all of which are personal qualities. So when Kenneth told me I was easily replaceable, he was telling you that he didn't understand the business he was supposed to be managing. Classic corporate blindness, focusing on organizational charts instead of relationship maps. That afternoon, I learned that Kenneth had called a company-wide meeting to discuss temporary setbacks in the government division. According to my former colleague Stephen, Kenneth had spent an hour explaining how they'd overcome the current challenges through strategic partnerships and enhanced business development. Stephen texted me afterward. He actually said losing the contracts might be a blessing in disguise because government work is too restrictive anyway. I showed the text to Vincent. Your former boss is about to learn that some blessings come with very expensive price tags, he said. 3 days into my new position at Sterling Solutions, Vincent called me into his office with a proposal that made me understand why Kenneth's world was about to collapse completely. Adam, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding relationship-based contracts. What if I told you that Sterling has been waiting for exactly this opportunity for 2 years? I leaned forward. What kind of opportunity? The opportunity to absorb North Peak's entire government division by hiring the person who built it. Vincent pulled out a folder thick with contract proposals and relationship maps. We've been tracking North Peak's government business for years, waiting for the right moment to make a move. Your former company has great relationships but limited capacity. Sterling has enormous capacity but limited government relationships. And now? Now we have both. Colonel Barnes called me personally yesterday. She wants to fast-track the Henderson contract with Sterling as the primary contractor, and you as the technical lead. She's also recommending us for 3 other projects that were previously going to other firms. I studied the documents. Wright Patterson was offering a contract extension worth $20 million over 5 years. Aberdeen wanted to expand their testing facility project to include Sterling's manufacturing capabilities. The numbers were staggering. Vincent, this isn't just about hiring me away from North Peak. This is about absorbing their entire government client base. Exactly. And it's all possible because one manager thought relationships were interchangeable. That afternoon, I made a series of calls to procurement officers I'd worked with for years. Each conversation followed the same pattern. I'd explain my move to Sterling Solutions and they'd immediately want to know about transferring existing contracts and exploring new opportunities. Major Helen Rodriguez from Aberdeen was the most direct. Adam, North Peak's current management seems to think government contracts are just paperwork. We need partners who understand that these projects involve national security considerations and can't be managed like commercial construction. By the end of the week, Sterling had received formal requests for proposal on 6 major contracts previously designated for North Peak. The total value exceeded $70 million over the next 4 years. Kenneth called me directly on Friday afternoon. "Adam, this is getting out of hand. Jonathan's willing to discuss a significant raise and a promotion if you'll consider coming back." I was in Sterling's new Government Contracts Division office, which Vincent had set up specifically for the business we'd acquired from North Peak. "What kind of promotion?" "Director level. Your own department. Kenneth would report to you on government matters." "Interesting. What changed Jonathan's mind about the value of specialized expertise?" Kenneth's voice tightened. "Look, maybe I was wrong about some things, but you're destroying a company that gave you 12 years of opportunity." "Kenneth, I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply working somewhere that understands the difference between management credentials and industry expertise." "The board is asking questions, Adam. They want to know how we lost $48 million in contracts in 1 week." "And what are you telling them?" "I'm telling them that some employees are vindictive when they don't get their way." I looked out the window at the Memphis skyline, the same view I'd had the day I signed with Sterling. "Are you also telling them that you never obtained security clearance for the contracts you were supposed to manage? Or that you've never worked a single government project from start to finish? Or that you told your only qualified government contractor he was easily replaceable?" Kenneth hung up. An hour later, Jonathan called. "Adam, I need you to understand something. Kenneth's gone. I'm prepared to offer you his position, plus equity, plus a 40% salary increase." "Jonathan, that's generous. But I'm curious about something. Why didn't any of this matter when Kenneth was convinced I was easily replaceable?" "Because I trusted his assessment of the situation." "And now?" "Now I know what $48 million in lost contracts feels like." The call came on Monday morning. Vincent knocked on my office door with a grin I'd never seen before. "Adam, you need to hear this." He put his phone on speaker. Jonathan Rivers's voice filled the room, tight with barely controlled panic. "Vincent, I'm calling to discuss a partnership opportunity between Sterling and North Peak." "What kind of partnership, Jonathan?" "We want to subcontract our government division to Sterling. Sterling would handle all government contracts and North Peak would focus on commercial projects." Vincent looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting proposal. What would that arrangement look like?" "Sterling would take over all existing government contracts and relationships. North Peak would provide administrative support and facility access. Revenue would be split 60-40 in Sterling's favor." I leaned forward and spoke into the phone. "Hello, Jonathan." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. "Adam, I should have known you'd be part of this conversation." "Actually, Jonathan, I am this conversation. Every government relationship you're trying to license to Sterling belongs to me personally. The clients made that very clear." "Adam, be reasonable. North Peak invested 12 years in your development. And Kenneth spent 3 years explaining how easily replaceable that investment was. Turns out he was wrong." Vincent took over. "Jonathan, here's our counteroffer. Sterling Solutions will consider acquiring North Peak's government division assets, office space, equipment, and administrative staff for fair market value. All contracts and client relationships stay with Adam and Sterling. That would eliminate our entire government division." "Yes," I said, "it would. Just like Kenneth eliminated it last week when he told me I was easily replaceable." "The board is meeting this afternoon, Adam. They're going to want explanations." "Tell them the truth, Jonathan. Tell them that Kenneth managed to lose $48 million in annual revenue by insulting the one person who actually generated it. Tell them that easily replaceable was the most expensive 11 words in North Peak's history." Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. "What do you want, Adam?" "I want Kenneth to understand what easily replaceable actually means." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my new office at Sterling Solutions when Stephen called with news from North Peak. "Kenneth got fired yesterday," he said. "Board meeting lasted 6 hours. Jonathan's taking direct control of what's left of the government division, but there's nothing left to control." "What about the other employees?" "Most of the administrative staff transferred to Sterling with the asset acquisition. Engineering is focusing entirely on commercial projects now. About half the revenue base, but at least it's stable. And Kenneth. Word is he's having trouble finding another position. Government contracting is a small industry and everyone knows what happened. No one wants to hire the guy who drove away a $48 million business because he didn't understand how it worked. I looked out my office window. Memphis was growing on me. The river, the energy, the sense of possibility that came with working somewhere that valued expertise over ego. Stephen, thanks for keeping me informed. Adam? One more thing. Colonel Barnes called Jonathan directly yesterday. She wanted to make sure he understood that this wasn't personal against North Peak. She said you'd always been professional and that Sterling was lucky to have you. That was kind of her. She also said that Kenneth's behavior was an embarrassment to the industry and that his reputation was permanently damaged among procurement professionals. After the call, I sat quietly for a few minutes. Vincent knocked and entered. Everything all right? Just reflecting on how things change. 3 weeks ago, Kenneth was convinced that MBA credentials and management theory were more valuable than 12 years of relationship building and technical expertise. And now? Now he knows the difference. I started reviewing the Henderson contract specifications. Colonel Barnes wanted to accelerate the timeline, and we had the resources to deliver ahead of schedule. Kenneth's downfall became a cautionary tale throughout the defense contracting industry. His name circulated in procurement offices as an example of how corporate arrogance could destroy years of carefully built relationships. When he applied for management positions at other government contractors, his references included the fact that he had single-handedly eliminated $48 million in annual revenue through poor personnel decisions and a fundamental misunderstanding of how specialized industries operate. His LinkedIn profile remained largely unchanged for months, a testament to his inability to find employment in an industry where reputation mattered more than credentials. The defense contracting community, particularly in the Memphis and Atlanta regions, used Kenneth's case as a teaching example of how dismissing specialized talent could catastrophically damage a company's competitive position. Procurement officers who had worked with me for years made it clear that Kenneth's treatment of experienced contractors reflected poorly on his judgment and leadership capabilities. His attempts to rebuild his career in commercial construction were hampered by the industry's interconnected nature. Former colleagues and competitors had heard about North Peak's spectacular government division collapse. Kenneth's professional isolation deepened when Sterling Solutions' success with former North Peak contracts became industry news. Every successful project completion under my leadership at Sterling served as a reminder of what Kenneth had thrown away through his dismissive attitude and poor management decisions. His reputation never recovered from being the executive who proved that some people truly are irreplaceable, while others are all too easily forgotten. I signed the Henderson contract renewal in Colonel Barnes's office 6 months later, surrounded by the same procurement team I'd worked with for years. Sometimes the most valuable lesson is learning that respect earned through competence and dedication always outlasts the authority that comes from a corner office and an expensive degree. You're holding me back from my dreams, Moses. I can't live like this anymore. My name is Moses Hartwell. I'm 42 years old, and I manage logistics for Thornbright Ventures here in Nashville, Tennessee. Been married to Bethany for 12 years. She said those words while I was fixing the kitchen faucet on a Tuesday evening. Same hands that had signed mortgage papers and investment accounts to build the life she was now calling a prison. I set down my wrench and looked at her. Bethany stood in the doorway wearing the yoga pants I bought her last month, arms crossed, that familiar look of frustration painting her face. This wasn't the first time she'd brought up her dreams. Acting classes, auditions, workshops. I'd been paying for all of it while she complained about the weight of domestic obligations. "What exactly am I holding you back from?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Everything. I should be in Los Angeles, not stuck here playing house. I should be auditioning for real roles, not community theater." She gestured around our kitchen like it was a cell. "I need freedom to pursue my career without worrying about cooking dinner or doing laundry." I nodded slowly. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house she wanted freedom from was the same one I worked 60-hour weeks to afford. The car she drove to those acting classes was registered in my name. The checking account that funded her headshots and workshop fees came from paychecks I earned while she spent afternoons reading scripts. I see, I said. Do you? Because I don't think you understand how suffocating this feels. I wake up every day knowing I'm wasting my talent because I'm trapped in this routine. Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine pain. I love you, but I need to be free to become who I'm supposed to be. That word, free. She'd been using it more often lately, usually when the credit card statement arrived or when I asked her to handle grocery shopping while I worked late. Freedom apparently meant pursuing dreams without the inconvenience of paying for them. I finished tightening the faucet and tested the handle. Water flowed smooth and steady. Some things, when you fix them right the first time, don't break again. Maybe you're right, I said, wiping my hands on the dish towel. Maybe it's time you had that freedom. The look of surprise that crossed her face should have warned me. She'd expected a fight, not agreement. But I was tired of being the anchor she blamed for her failures to launch. That night, lying next to her in the bed I'd bought with my bonus money, I stared at the ceiling and planned exactly how to give Bethany everything she'd asked for. The thing about supporting someone's dreams is that you start to forget your own. When I met Bethany 13 years ago at a coffee shop downtown, she was waitressing and talking about moving to New York to pursue acting. I was working my way up at a small freight company, saving every dollar I could. She had this energy that drew people in. When she talked about performing, her whole face lit up. I wanted to be part of that light, so I became her safety net. When her waitressing shifts got cut, I covered her rent. When she needed headshots, I paid the photographer. When she wanted to quit her job to focus on auditions, I worked overtime to cover both our expenses. We got married 3 years in. Simple ceremony, just our families. I bought the house in my name because my credit was better, and I had the down payment saved. Same with the cars, the investment accounts, everything. Bethany never asked about the paperwork. She trusted me to handle the boring stuff while she focused on her craft. The first few years were good. She booked some local commercials, got cast in a few plays. I attended every performance, proud to watch her shine on stage. But the bigger roles never came. The callbacks led nowhere. The agent she'd been courting for 2 years stopped returning her calls. That's when the resentment started creeping in. If we lived in a bigger city, I'd have more opportunities, she'd say. If I didn't have to worry about household responsibilities, I could focus better on my career. If you understood what it meant to be an artist, you'd support me differently. Each complaint came with an implied solution. I should provide more support while expecting less from her. The groceries I asked her to buy became a burden. The dinners I hoped we'd cook together became interruptions to her process. The mortgage payment that kept a roof over her head became a chain around her ankles. I started noticing things. How she never asked about my work anymore. How she'd book expensive workshops without checking our budget first. How she'd spend hours on social media following other actors' careers while I handled everything from bill paying to lawn maintenance. Last month, I found an email on her laptop. She'd been corresponding with a talent manager in Los Angeles, making plans to relocate. The email talked about finally breaking free from my current situation and escaping the limitations of my domestic life. She was already halfway gone. I was just the financial structure keeping her comfortable while she planned her exit. The morning after our kitchen conversation, I called my lawyer. Then I called my bank. Then I started doing what I should have done months ago, paying attention to what freedom actually meant. The call came from my lawyer on Friday afternoon. Everything was in order. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, the checking account. All of it legally mine, purchased and funded before and during our marriage with money I'd earned. Bethany's name wasn't on any of it. "Are you sure about this, Moses?" David asked. "Marriage is a partnership. Even if the assets are in your name, she might have some claim." "We live in a non-community property state," I said. "She never contributed financially to any of these purchases. I've got documentation going back 12 years. This seems sudden." It wasn't sudden. It had been building for years every time she treated my support like a given while treating me like an obstacle. I just hadn't been paying attention to the pattern. That evening, I sat Bethany down in our living room. She was reading a script for another audition, highlighting lines in yellow marker. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started. "About needing freedom to pursue your dreams." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You have?" "I think you're right. I think you should have that freedom." I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. "I'm going to give it to you." Her smile widened. "Moses, that's wonderful. I knew you'd understand eventually. So we'll start looking at places in Los Angeles? I've already been in touch with some people out there, and there's this acting coach who—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I'm going to give you complete freedom. From me, from this house, from everything that's been holding you back." The smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm leaving tomorrow. You'll have total freedom to pursue your career without any domestic obligations or constraints." She blinked several times. "Leaving? But we're married. This is our house, our life." "This is my house, Bethany, my car in the driveway, my investment accounts funding your acting classes." I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "I've documented everything here. You wanted freedom from domestic responsibilities, and you're going to get exactly that." The script slipped from her hands onto the coffee table. "You can't just leave me with nothing." "I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with exactly what you've contributed to this household over the past 12 years, which is your talent, your dreams, and your freedom." Her face went white. "Moses, this isn't what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant. You wanted the comfort of financial support without the inconvenience of gratitude or partnership. You wanted me to fund your dreams while you complained about the life that made those dreams possible." I stood up and picked up the suitcase I'd packed that afternoon. "You asked for freedom, Bethany. Now you have it." The look of dawning realization in her eyes told me she was finally understanding the difference between independence and abandonment. She called me 6 times before I answered. I was sitting in a hotel room across town, eating takeout Chinese food and watching the evening news. My phone buzzed against the nightstand until I finally picked up. "Moses, you need to come home right now." Her voice was tight with panic. "This is insane. We need to talk." "We did talk. You told me you needed freedom." "Not like this. I meant we needed to restructure our relationship so I could focus on my career. I didn't mean you should abandon me." I set down my chopsticks. "What exactly did you think freedom meant, Bethany?" "I thought it meant you'd support my goals without making me feel guilty about household stuff. Maybe we'd get a housekeeper, or you'd take on more domestic responsibilities while I pursued auditions. So freedom meant me doing more work while you did less." That's not how I meant it." But the pause told me it was exactly how she'd meant it. "Look, I went to the bank today. They said I can't access the checking account anymore." "That's because your name was never on it." "What do you mean my name was never on it? I've been using that account for years." "You've been using a debit card I gave you with access to my account. The account was always mine. I just let you use it." The silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her breathing, shallow and quick. "The house too?" "The house too." "The cars?" "Both cars." "The investment accounts?" "All of them." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed from panic to something sharper. "You planned this. You've been planning this." "I planned to support my wife's dreams for as long as she appreciated that support. When she started treating it like a burden I was placing on her rather than a gift I was giving her, I planned differently." "You can't do this to me, Moses. I'll get a lawyer." "You should. Ask them about marital property laws in Tennessee. Ask them what happens when one spouse owns all the assets outright, purchased with income the other spouse never contributed to." I kept my voice calm. "Ask them how much it costs to hire a lawyer when you don't have access to any money." I could hear her pacing now, her footsteps echoing through the house I'd bought. Our house. My house. This is cruel. This is beyond cruel. After 12 years of marriage, you're just going to leave me with nothing? Bethany, I left you with your freedom. That's what you asked for. I asked for understanding, not abandonment. No, you asked to be free from domestic obligations while keeping domestic benefits. You wanted to pursue your dreams while I handled your reality. I rubbed my temples. You got exactly what you asked for, the freedom to pursue your career without the burden of a house payment, insurance, grocery bills, or a husband who expects dinner occasionally. Where am I supposed to live? Wherever free people live when they're pursuing their dreams. How am I supposed to pay for things? However free people pay for things when they're pursuing their dreams. The crying started then, not the gentle tears of sadness, but the harsh sobs of someone who's just realized they've made a terrible miscalculation. Moses, please. We can work this out. I didn't mean for it to sound the way it did. I was just frustrated. I love you. I love our life together. You love the comfort I provided. There's a difference. That's not true. When's the last time you asked me about my work? When's the last time you cooked dinner? When's the last time you said thank you for paying for your acting classes? I waited for an answer that didn't come. When's the last time you acted like a partner instead of a dependent? The line went quiet except for her crying. I'll be by tomorrow to get the rest of my things, I said. Take your time to figure out your next steps. You've got until the end of the month. The end of the month. That's when the lease I'm signing on my new place starts. The mortgage on that house comes out of my account. I'm not paying to house someone who finds my presence suffocating. She was waiting for me when I arrived Saturday morning, sitting on the front porch steps wearing the same clothes from yesterday, looking like she hadn't slept. I called my sister, she said as I got out of my truck. She said, you can't just kick me out of my own home. This was never your home, Bethany. You lived here, but you never owned it. There's a difference. I walked past her to the front door, keys in hand. She followed me inside. Lauren said I should fight this. She said after 12 years of marriage, I'm entitled to half of everything. Lauren's wrong. I started gathering my tools from the garage. Tennessee isn't a community property state. Separate property stays separate. Since you never contributed financially to any of these purchases and your name isn't on any of the documentation, you don't have a claim. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 12 years complaining about the life someone else is paying for. I loaded my toolbox into a plastic bin. What's not fair is treating generosity like oppression. She followed me from room to room as I packed. I contributed in other ways. I managed the household. You did laundry and occasionally cooked dinner. I handled the mortgage, insurance, car payments, utilities, groceries, home maintenance, and your acting expenses. I pulled my clothes from the closet. Managing the household would have meant managing the budget, paying bills, handling repairs. You managed your own schedule. I supported your career too. I stopped packing and looked at her. How? I was there for you when you had stressful days at work. You were physically present in the house I paid for while I dealt with work stress that came from supporting both of us financially. I folded a shirt and put it in my suitcase. That's not support. That's coexistence. She sat down on the bed watching me pack. This isn't who you are, Moses. You're not cruel. You're right. I'm not cruel. Cruel would have been letting you keep believing that independence meant being financially supported by someone you resent. I zipped up the suitcase. Cruel would have been letting you move to Los Angeles on my dime while you complained about feeling trapped. I never said I resented you. I pulled out my phone and opened the email app. You wrote to that talent manager about finally breaking free from your current situation and escaping the limitations of your domestic life. What situation were you breaking free from, Bethany? What limitations? Her face went pale as I read her own words back to her. You've been planning to leave for months. The only difference between your plan and mine is that yours involved taking my money with you. I wasn't going to take your money. You were going to take my car to the airport. You were going to use my credit card to pay for your apartment deposit. You were going to access my checking account to pay for your new headshots. I sat down across from her. The only reason you weren't going to take my money is because you didn't think of it as my money. You thought of it as our money, even though you never earned any of it." She started crying again, but softer this time. "I didn't think about it that way." "I know, that's the problem. You didn't think about where the money came from or what it cost me to provide it. You just expected it to be there while you pursued your dreams and complained about your life." I stood up and grabbed my last bag. "Now you can pursue those dreams without any domestic limitations at all." The look on her face told me she was finally understanding what those limitations had actually been protecting her from. The new apartment was smaller, but it was mine. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen just big enough for one person who actually cooked. I signed the lease on Monday and moved in on Tuesday. Bethany called while I was arranging furniture. "The electricity got shut off," she said without preamble. "The auto pay came out of my account. I canceled it yesterday." "You canceled the electricity?" "I canceled the auto pay on all the utilities. The accounts are in my name for a house I don't live in anymore." I wedged my couch against the wall. "You'll need to call and set up new service in your name." "Moses, I don't have the money for deposits and connection fees." "That sounds like a problem someone with complete freedom needs to solve." "Please don't do this. I get it now. I understand what you were providing. I'll be more grateful. I'll contribute more." I stopped arranging furniture. "Bethany, what would you contribute? You don't have a job. You don't have any income. You don't have any savings. What exactly would you contribute to a partnership?" "I could get a job." "You could have gotten a job any time in the last 12 years. You chose not to because I was handling the financial responsibilities." I sat down on my couch. "Now you'll have to get a job because no one else is going to handle them for you. This is punishment. You're punishing me for being honest about my feelings. I'm giving you exactly what you said you wanted. Freedom from domestic obligations. I wanted us to work together to support my career goals. You wanted me to work while you pursued goals that never included me. There's a difference." I looked around my small, quiet apartment. For 12 years, I worked extra hours so you could chase a dream that was always about you leaving me behind. I paid for acting classes where you learned to pretend to be someone else. Auditions for roles that would take you away from home. Workshops that taught you how to network with people who could offer you a different life. That's not how acting works. That's exactly how your acting worked. Every role you wanted was in a different city. Every opportunity you chased led away from the life we'd built together. Every dream you had involved you becoming someone else and going somewhere else. The silence told me she couldn't argue with that. I spent 12 years funding your exit strategy while you complained that I wasn't supportive enough. I stood up and walked to my kitchen window. Now you have the freedom to pursue all those opportunities without the burden of a husband who expects basic consideration. Moses, I'm scared. I don't know how to live without you. And you should have thought about that before you started planning to live without me. I opened my refrigerator and pulled out a beer. You wanted freedom from domestic obligations. You've got it. You wanted to pursue your dreams without constraints. Go pursue them. But I need help. I need support. You need what every independent person needs: a job, an income, and a plan for paying your own bills. I opened the beer and took a sip. All the things I was providing while you complained about feeling trapped. Please come home. I am home, Bethany. This is my home now. A place where no one complains about the life I'm working to provide. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside my window, the sun was setting over Nashville. Tomorrow I'd go to work and come home to my own space, where everything belonged to me, and no one resented me for providing it. For the first time in months, I felt free. The papers were served on Friday afternoon while she was at an audition. I'd hired a process server to deliver the divorce documents to the house. My house, the one she'd been living in rent-free for 2 weeks since I left. She called me immediately after, voice shaking with rage and desperation. Divorce papers? You're divorcing me? I'm formalizing what you already wanted, freedom from domestic obligations. This says you're seeking full ownership of all marital assets. I'm seeking legal confirmation of what was always true. I own those assets. I bought them, I maintain them, I pay for them. The house is worth $400,000. The house I bought with money I earned before and during our marriage while you contributed nothing financially. I was sitting in my living room, feet up on my coffee table, eating a sandwich I'd made myself. The house you wanted freedom from. This is vindictive. This is practical. I'm not going to pay a mortgage on a house for someone who finds my presence in her life suffocating. Moses, please, let's talk about this rationally. We did talk about it rationally. You rationally explained that I was holding you back from your dreams. I rationally agreed to stop holding you back. I didn't mean divorce. What did you mean? You wanted to pursue your career without domestic obligations while I continued to provide domestic benefits. You wanted freedom without consequences. That's not how freedom works. Her crying started again, but this time it sounded different. Desperate. Final. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. With what money? I closed your access to my accounts. You'll need to find a lawyer who works for free or get a job and pay for one yourself. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've thought about giving you exactly what you asked for, complete freedom to pursue your dreams without the burden of a marriage that was holding you back. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Bethany had moved back in with her parents in Memphis. She'd taken a job waiting tables again, trying to save money for a security deposit on an apartment. The acting career had stalled when she couldn't afford classes or headshots anymore. David, my lawyer, called with updates on the divorce proceedings. She's agreed to the terms. No contest. She doesn't have the money to fight it. Good. She's asking if you'd consider helping with her moving expenses. I laughed. Actually laughed. Tell her that independent people handle their own moving expenses. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in November. I sat in the courthouse and signed papers that legally confirmed what had always been true. I owned my own life, my own assets, my own choices. That evening, I cooked dinner in my own kitchen and ate it at my own table in my own house. I'd bought a small place in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No one complained about the mortgage payment or the grocery bills or the quiet satisfaction of maintaining something I'd worked for. I thought about Bethany sometimes. Wonder if she ever found the success she'd been chasing. Wonder if she learned the difference between freedom and abandonment, between independence and ingratitude. But mostly I thought about the future I was building for myself. A life where my generosity wasn't treated as oppression, where my support wasn't resented as limitation, where partnership meant something mutual instead of one-sided. Bethany had wanted freedom from domestic obligations. She'd gotten exactly that, along with freedom from domestic benefits, domestic security, and domestic support. She'd learned that true independence meant standing on your own feet instead of complaining about the ground someone else was providing. I'd learned something too. Sometimes the most generous thing you can give someone who wants freedom is exactly what they ask for.